Good morning and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. My name's Kit Salt and I'm the Head of Endpoint Assessment here at SFJ Awards, and I'll be hosting today's event with Amanda Charlton, Curriculum Manager at Bridgewater and Taunton College, and Mark Palmer, Quality Assurance Manager at Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service. Today's webinar is the third in our series of webinars for fire and rescue services, and the focus of today's session is using the Operational Firefighter Apprenticeship Standard to recruit and train on-call firefighters. Our two key speakers today have got end-to-end experience of mapping an existing training program for on-call firefighters into the apprenticeship standard, delivering it right through to endpoint assessment. And they're going to give you an overview of how they did it. We're also lucky enough to be able to hear today from two apprentices who successfully completed the apprenticeship program. So before we begin, I'm just going to run through some housekeeping so you know how to participate in today's event. So even though many of us may now be hybrid, over the last 2 years, whether you want to or not, I'm sure you've all become very familiar with how Zoom webinars run. But just in case, here are a couple of quick points for you. At any time during the webinar, you can submit your questions to us. So to do so, just type them in the Q&A feed at the bottom of the control panel on your screen. If you see a question in there that you really like that someone else has put in, you can upvote it so that we can then put that as a primary. We'll address as many questions as we can during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but any questions we can't answer today, we'll reply to at the end of the webinar. So we'd like this webinar to be as two-way as we can make it, as if you were in the room. So as usual in these kind of webinars, your speakers are muted, but the way you can chat to us and add any comments is to use the chat function, which you will also see on your screen. So just to get us going and give us a bit of practice, let's have a practice with the chat function. So if you're willing to, can you pop your name and your role and your location into the chat so we can see who's here today? Brilliant. I can see Zoe's here today. Thank goodness. Hi, Dale from Tyne and Wear. Elliot at Avon. Oh gosh, there's lots of you all coming through now. That's brilliant. Hi to everybody. I can see lots of familiar faces that I know, so that's great. It's great to have you all here today. Hi, Debbie at Staffordshire. Good to see you. Okay, so the chat function's clearly working. So to kick things off and get us warmed up with another use of interactive elements we're going to use today, we're going to pop up a quick poll. So the poll is about how many of you are considering using an on-call apprenticeship program for your firefighters. So, you know, in your service, are you thinking about it? Are you definitely not, or you could be persuaded, or you want to, but you don't know where to start? So if you just put your vote now into the poll. Okay, so I can see the poll running. That's brilliant. Okay, so we can see some results coming through. Excellent. So 50% of you are considering doing it, which is great. And 29% of you want to, but don't know where to start. So that's a really high percentage. So hopefully, after some of the information we're going to give you today and our panelists are going to share with you, you'll be in a better position and more informed. So that's great. So SFJ Awards involvement with the webinar today is twofold. So firstly, as you know, SFJ Awards sits under the umbrella of a charity, the Workforce Development Trust. And the Workforce Development Trust has at its heart supporting the development and effective use of sector workforce skills to provide services for public benefit. Secondly, SFJ Awards is a sector specialist and independent endpoint assessment organisation in the protective services sector. So we've carried out over 600 endpoint assessments on this standard to date. And we were lucky enough to carry out the first endpoint assessments for a cohort of on-call firefighters at Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service last year. So we're really keen to support the further rollout of the standard across the sector. So on the screen now, you can see an outline of today's session. And so to briefly outline, first of all, we're going to hear from Mark Palmer at Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue. And Mark's been instrumental in ensuring that the training for on-call firefighters maps across to the apprenticeship standard. And he's supported apprentices through the process, working closely with Amanda Charlton from Bridgewater and Taunton College, who will be coming up after that. We're also going to hear from two former apprentices, both of whom went through the training and the endpoint assessment as on-call firefighters. We'll hear their experiences firsthand and find out what opportunities have opened up for them since completing the programme. And towards the end of the webinar, as I said earlier, there'll be some time for questions to all of us. So if you're thinking of these, while you're thinking of them, just add them to the Q&A section of the webinar and we'll get through as many as we can. So that's enough from me. I'm now delighted to hand over to Mark Palmer from Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue. So over to you, Mark.
So good morning, and thank you, Kit, for inviting me to share our successful trial of the on-call firefighter apprenticeship. We have been running the trial in Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service since January 2019. We have had our first cohort of 6 on-call apprentices who successfully went through endpoint assessment last April, and we have our second cohort of 9 apprentices completing the endpoint assessment in March of this year. So why did Devon and Somerset go down the route of on-call firefighters apprenticeships? So we are the largest non-metropolitan fire and rescue service in England, covering almost 4,000 square miles over 2 counties. We employ 1,915 dedicated staff. We have 1,600 frontline operational firefighters over 83 stations. 79 stations have on-call crewed appliances, and that's 1,181 on-call firefighters. Our aim is to train all our firefighters to the same standard, but as many of you are aware, we need to deliver the training in modules instead of a block of 10 to 12 week initial course and spread over a greater period of time. I represented Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service and the Fire and Rescue Services Association on the Trailblazer group. With my background in on-call service, we wanted to ensure all firefighters could access the same training and development opportunities as our old-time staff. So what had we hoped to get out of it? So we were looking for a national standard for the operational firefighter. Many years ago, we looked at the MVQ that was available, but that didn't really work for us. The apprenticeship is a program for us. We can deliver our training and development in the same way as we've already been doing for many years. With the apprenticeship, we can formalise what we've been doing. It also ensures we have a robust quality assurance process to ensure our firefighter training and development programme is delivered consistently across the organisation. The trial has already identified where we need to improve, and we are working hard with our new apprentices and stations to support their development. You can have the best training department in England, but the secret to a successful apprenticeship is the development period. The apprentices are practicing their skills, gaining more knowledge and learning those behaviours we are seeking in the fire service. So what is the plan for our future? We have enrolled 2 cohorts of full-time firefighters. 12 apprentices started last September and 22 apprentices started 2 weeks ago. We are now in the process of evaluating the 2 on-call cohorts and revising our initial training and development programme, cross-mapping it to the new version of the standard. We will be able to roll out later in the year to all on-call firefighters that are eligible to be enrolled on the apprenticeship. We will always need to have a training and development programme running in tandem with the apprenticeship, because we will always have someone who will not be eligible or even not wanting to undertake the extra time to complete the apprenticeship and just wanting to provide fire cover in their community. If they are doing another apprenticeship in their primary employment, will also make them not eligible for the apprenticeship. Funding rules state that an apprentice can only do one apprenticeship at any one time. So what does a program look like? The apprenticeship is based around the same principles of our previous training program. Initial training, then a development period in the workplace and an assessment for competence. We have developed our training development program in Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service, starting with an initial training, then a development in the workplace, a gateway assessment, which will double up for competency assessment, and then endpoint assessment. For the non-apprentices, the gateway assessment will be their final assessment. You are aware that the Education Skills Funding Agency stipulate an apprenticeship must provide a practical period of work and training that lasts for a minimum duration of 12 months. The minimum duration of each apprenticeship is based on an apprentice working at least 30 hours a week, including any off-the-job training. It also states working fewer than 30 hours a week or being on a 0-hour contract must not be a barrier to successfully completing an apprenticeship. So the bottom line is an apprentice is required to do a minimum of 1,560 hours. So where did we start? How many hours do your on-call firefighters do? So we completed a table for each station to understand what hours an on-call firefighter will do at their station. We then look at the time our on-call firefighters are in development, and that ranged between 3 and 5 years. We felt that 5 years was too long. However, we decided that we wanted our on-call firefighters to be in development for a maximum of 4 years. We also needed to know the number of calls the firefighter would attend a year. This gave us an average number of paid hours per station. That's the detail we needed to start. So an on-call firefighter in our service does in 24 months, 650 hours. In 36 months, 824 hours, and 48 months, 998 hours. So over 4 years, 998 hours. This figure includes initial training modules, drill nights, exercises, standard tests, and some other additional hours. So that gave us a shortfall of 562 hours, which equates to 11.7 hours a month. So if we look at the worst case scenario, a station has 1 call a week, 52 a year. We would expect an on-call firefighter to do 50% of the calls, so that equates to 26 paid hours a year, just over 2 hours a month. That then leaves us a shortfall of 9 hours a month, or 1 whole-time shift a month. This could be used making up shortfalls in old-time crewing. I am sure your on-call firefighters would jump at the opportunity to do 9 hours a month operational work. After all, that's what they join for. I expect you're thinking, how can we afford to pay someone additional hours? In fact, it would cost you, worst case scenario, 458 hours, and that is £5,271.58, plus some employer contributions. So in fact, you can't afford not to do this. What does it cost you to train and develop your firefighters now? I expect between £15,000 and £20,000. So it's a simple calculation. If you draw down funding to pay for the development training, the money you have budgeted for can then be paid for development time. Depending on your partnership you have with a training provider and how much training you provide yourself will vary slightly. So if you have £14,000 worth of funding, less maximum 20% EPA cost leaves 11,200, and that pays for the training. The 11,200 that will pay towards the training that you will have already budgeted for. So even if you pay the 5,271 in wages, you will still have to invest in firefighter development a total of £5,928. With the future pressures on budgets, how can you ignore this opportunity to develop your firefighters? Firefighter development is priceless. Firefighter safety must be improved, and this is an opportunity for you to invest in it. So why did Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service partner with Bridgwater and Taunton College? We've had links with Bridgwater and Taunton College with the 999 Academy they run. We weren't a registered apprenticeship training provider at the time, and our skills in delivering specialist firefighter training. We wanted to partner with a registered apprenticeship training provider who had the expertise with the wider training requirements of Ofsted. So I'm now going to pass over to Amanda Charlton at Bridgwater and Taunton College. Thank you.
Good morning, Mark, and thank you very much for that. It's amazing to see that whole programme that we've come through, and good morning to everyone on the call today. It's so nice to see so many of you here. I just wanted to take a few minutes this morning just to outline who we are as a college and how we've worked with Devon and Somerset to deliver the apprenticeship programme, and looking at how we can offer those services to other fire services who may be looking to do the same. So first up then, as a college, we're an FE college with around a £51 million turnover, and we are graded outstanding for apprenticeships in our most recent Ofsted. We are based in Somerset. We've got 3 campuses in Somerset, including the National College, the Nuclear. But as a college, we have UK-wide coverage on many national programmes with some very, very large employers. So certainly within my curriculum area, I've got apprentices in Newcastle and Faversham and Kent and Plymouth and Liverpool and everywhere else in between. So we're very, very used to working across the UK, and I have assessors based throughout the UK as well. So not everything comes from Somerset. As Mark mentioned, we have been working with Devon and Somerset for a number of years on the 999 Academy, which provides a fantastic pipeline for our study programme learners at 18 when they finish their 2-year programmes to actually filter into the protective services. And it was particularly great for us to actually have 2 of our public service students who'd completed the 999 Academy actually be part of the first cohort of on-call firefighters. And that was a fantastic journey that they made, but also really inspirational for learners attending on study programmes at the college. So we're currently working with 2 fire services on delivery of the operational firefighter apprenticeship, and 1 fire service and the first NHS mental health crisis line on the emergency service contact handler. We're also working with the Trailblazer review for the contact handler with Thames Valley Police to actually feed back views from employers on the changes to the contact handler as part of that review. As a college, whenever we look to start a new standard, a new apprenticeship standard, we always go through a very rigorous internal process to decide who we want to engage with as the endpoint assessment, which includes things like value for money, the quality of resources, the reputation of the organisation, and in particular, the independence of the organisation. So I was thrilled that our internal process came out with SFJ awards, and absolutely delighted that they saw the same in us and approved us as a centre with them for the endpoint assessment. So Mark's highlighted a number of ways in which we've delivered the apprenticeship. So just to kind of highlight those again, really, is that we think it's really important not to start from scratch. every fire service that we've worked with so far has got a very rigorous firefighter development journey, which is part of their organisational development. And what we do is like to take the time to actually look at mapping that against the apprenticeship standard, and then working together to look at what work or assessment or evidence needs to be found to fill those gaps. It's really important for us, particularly with on-call, that you're not over-assessing and creating additional work. We're looking at one piece of work that will fulfill both your internal development journey and also the apprenticeship standard. That does take a bit longer. We don't have a bank of assessments that are generic that we use across the board. We really believe it's important to make that apprenticeship standard bespoke to your organisation. If anyone is looking to engage with us, we can actually deliver through your own training facilities, or we do have access to training facilities in the southwest here. And obviously, Devon have fantastic facilities that they're using for their apprenticeship development. We have dedicated learning coaches that make monthly engagement with the apprentices, both online and face-to-face during visits. And we see them really very much as the glue that holds the apprenticeship together, that makes sure that everything is oiled and moving well between the line managers, the apprentice, their station, and their learning journey, and making sure that they've got every opportunity to be completely prepared for that endpoint assessment. Where possible as well, or where needed, that learning coach will also support the development and completion of functional skills in English and maths. Certainly with on-call firefighters, our experience has been that many of the on-call need to do those functional skills. The other thing that we can offer as a college is that every apprentice gets access to an electronic portfolio system, and that also supports the endpoint assessment process, because that will be shared with the internal assessors from SFJ awards at endpoint assessment. So there's no transferring of files or trying to get a separate portfolio together. And we also have a unique program in the college called My BTC Advantage, which we also embed into the apprenticeship, which enables things like focusing on being more community minded, raising aspirations, increasing communication skills, and so on. So that's how we like to work with organisations, very much about looking at what you do and how the apprenticeship can embed with that. So I think that's probably enough from me at this point. I'm going to ask James and Laura to join me, and they can tell you about their particular journey and how it worked for them. Good morning, Laura and James.
Morning.
Good morning.
So Laura, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. So I know that you had an interesting start to your apprenticeship journey as a firefighter, and it started with a roundabout, is that right?
It did, thanks Amanda. So I'd taken voluntary redundancy from my corporate role of about 14 years, and whilst I was having a bit of a break to spend some time with my two boys, I saw one of the banners, and I'm sure many people are aware of the banners outside fire stations. I saw one in Newton Abbot on the roundabout, and yeah, I thought I would inquire. So I always wanted to be a firefighter. I did public services at college, but when I was at college, it wasn't really encouraged as a female to go down that route. So I thought it was too difficult. So I ended up going down a different career path. But then I saw it and I thought, you know what, I can do that. And I applied and was successful. And yeah, so I got my contract with Newton Abbot, and was lucky enough to be also enrolled on the apprenticeship.
Fantastic. And what were some of the key learning points that came out of the apprenticeship for you?
So for me, because I was initially enrolled on the normal development route via the non-apprenticeship, I could see that there was quite a big difference, because of the apprenticeship is aligned to the whole time development, and we were getting access to training which would allow us to do the same as what the whole time would do. So for me, that was huge. So a bit more around business safety, more community, but also it was that standard of the training and access to those opportunities a bit more, because obviously we needed to achieve certain amounts of tasks to be able to achieve our apprenticeship. So it meant that as Mark mentioned earlier, those hours that we needed to do in order to complete the apprenticeship were freed up for us. And yeah, it just felt that that access helped me become a better firefighter.
Fantastic, thank you, Laura. James, I know that you were also captured by that same banner at the same roundabout, but your apprenticeship journey was a little bit different, wasn't it?
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. It was slightly different. When I was at school, I didn't gain the necessary grades to enroll on the apprenticeship initially, but through the apprenticeship, I was able to gain those functional skills in English and maths, which, you know, alongside the apprenticeship has given me a real help in understanding things and developing myself throughout the apprenticeship. So it wasn't actually too much work either alongside the apprenticeship. So it's additional qualifications that I can carry forward.
Fantastic. And I think we actually came down to your station and actually delivered the exams down there, I think, James.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So it was easy. Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you said that. And what about the key points on the learning journey for you? What are the things that stand out for you?
So for me, I think I'm naturally very practical, and the opportunity to learn and develop my technical skills whilst working was really good. As Laura said previously, the opportunities to take part in community safety and other areas that you necessarily wouldn't do as an on-call firefighter are great. And I think for your development needs, it's very important to align those standards with a whole-time firefighter. So for me, yeah, those opportunities that wouldn't always be open to you was a big plus.
Fantastic. And both Laura and James, you both used the electronic portfolio to capture all your evidence for your apprenticeship. How did that work for you? And I know that we get you to do lots of things in your learning journal, which should have helped you with your endpoint assessment, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. The files were fantastic to use, easy to use, had an app, allowed you to input information soon after an incident, which was quite helpful, or after training, and then going through it before the endpoint assessment was really helpful, just having access to that and reminding yourself, because it is a long journey and at Newton Abbot it's very busy as well, so you have lots of incidents, lots of great opportunities to choose from, really, to display those skills and yeah, bring them along to that EPA.
Fantastic. And James, tell us about your journey since you've completed your endpoint assessment.
So since completing my endpoint assessment, I'm now a whole-time firefighter on a whole-time watch in Paignton. I've also gained promotion at Newton Abbot, so I'm now a crew manager at Newton Abbot. So it's been a sort of, yeah, very active couple of years. But I'm very proud, and you know, it's great to be able to give something back to the community that we live in.
Fantastic. And Laura, you've got a similar experience from the end of your endpoint assessment as well.
I have. So I, having done another apprenticeship within my old role, a leadership apprenticeship, as well as the firefighter apprenticeship, I'm now the services apprenticeship lead. So quite exciting, and I've enrolled onto a CMDA, so Charter Manager apprenticeship, which I start tomorrow. So that's very exciting. So that's a level 6 and it's a degree. And actually for me, I didn't go to university, and I didn't want to end up with student debts. So doing the apprenticeship to gain a degree is going to prevent me from having those student debts, but also I'll be doing it whilst I'm doing my role. So yeah, a win-win. So yeah, really happy and excited about that.
It is, and it's a win for us here at the college as well, because I get to work with you most days now, which is definitely a win for us. And James, I think you're doing the same program as Laura, is that right?
No, I'm as part of my crew manager development, I'm going to be doing the leadership and management level 3. So yeah, really looking forward to embarking on that new challenge.
So neither of you are finished with apprenticeships quite yet.
No.
Fantastic.
I'll be looking at the next one after that.
Well, is there anything else you feel you would like to say? I mean, what advice would you give any service looking to have a go at doing the on-call firefighter program?
For me, I think it was a success. It just it really helps bridge that gap between the two, so on call and whole time. I think it gives people like James that really great opportunity to move into a whole time role. And I think that's one of the things that we'll be looking at moving forwards, is that an option. So we have an on call to whole time process currently, and how we build that apprenticeship into that. Does that allow those on call apprentices to gain a whole time role through a route there. But yeah, it just it's a really positive outcome for me. I think it was just really great opportunity.
What about you, James?
For myself, I think the main takeaway is the aligning of standards between the on-call and the whole time. And I think the apprenticeship is sort of pivotal in that, in many respects, because it is a lot more in depth than the standard development that you would normally get. And I think, yeah, it's just about aligning those standards. And then, like we say, a firefighter's a firefighter, whether you're on call or whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like that mantra of yours, James. You know, we were absolutely right. A firefighter is a firefighter. And it's about making sure that, you know, we give everyone an opportunity of getting those same standards. Yeah. So thank you both for your time today. Please do stick around, because there may well be some question and answers towards the end of the webinar, but I'm going to hand back to Kit now.
Wow, thank you. That was fantastic. And I think Laura and James, such a testament to actually how it can work, really, and benefit not only them, but also the organisation. So thank you very much for that. Thank you to Mark, and thank you to Amanda, and of course Laura and James. And before we move on, I'd like to pop up another quick poll just to measure how you might feel now about introducing on-call apprenticeships, having listened to the panel so far. And I know there's been a lot of information to take in. So you know, just how do you feel now? Do you feel any better about it? So those of you that were thinking, I think it was 29%, do you think, oh yeah, do you feel a bit more fired up and think, actually, I can see how that can work? So if you just want to put your answers in the poll now, that's great. Okay. And I can see them coming through. Okay. And that's good. That's looking like those of you, some of you that were not 100% sure are now feel more fully informed. So that's brilliant. That's what this webinar is about. And it's also about having the opportunity to ask some questions, which we're going to go on to in a second. But also after the webinar, you can get in touch with us, and we can put you in touch with Mark and Amanda to have some more conversations, particularly around the maths bit, I think, and probably the funding bit and the hours, because there have been some questions about that. It was really interesting to see such a collaborative working arrangement between an employer and a training provider in the design and the delivery of the apprenticeship program, and the tripartite relationship that's been developed with everyone concerned. And I'm sure that has contributed to the success of the program and the excellent outcomes for the apprentices. So thank you for sharing that. So we'd now like to do some questions. So I'd like to invite Amanda and Mark to join me to take some questions from the audience, so that we can pick your brains a bit more. So hello, Mark. Hello, Amanda. Welcome back. Right. Okay. So I've got one in the question box for Mark, actually, from Debbie Jones at Staffordshire. On-call firefighters are more likely to leave the service during their development than a whole-time firefighter would. How is this managed with the funding of the apprenticeship, and does this reflect against you as a provider? And that's probably one for you, Amanda, as well, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, part of the trial we have had a couple leave during the apprenticeship, and you will get that with on-call firefighters. However, by putting them on this program and giving them that extra opportunity to develop, and that we're hoping that will improve the recruitment process and keep the firefighters. So that's it. It doesn't reflect too much on us, but Amanda can come back on if it reflects on them.
Yeah, all I would say is that our experience to date is that we lost one more on-call firefighter more than we did whole time, and both numbers were very, very small. So I'd agree with Mark, and certainly the sentiments we saw from Laura and James is that actually being on the apprenticeship actually improved people's motivation and commitment to being an on-call firefighter, because they could see the access to the training they were getting, the standard they were achieving, and actually getting that nationally recognised qualification and that endorsement through the endpoint assessment. I think actually it acts as a real motivator to keep your on-call firefighters engaged.
Yeah, okay. And I think we've seen, haven't we, from what Laura and James were saying, the value of apprenticeships, with Laura now going on to move on to the next apprenticeship as well. So it's brilliant that that can happen. Okay, another question from Debbie at Staffordshire. As many on-call firefighters have primary employment, how have those that have embarked onto the on-call apprenticeship achieved the required hours?
Okay, yeah. So we looked at most of our stations, and we've got 20 stations that don't really need to do any additional hours because of the number of fire calls that they do. It's the quieter stations that we need to really give the additional hours. And most on-call firefighters want to ride the fire engines and provide the cover. So by doing that 9 hours a month extra, they can achieve it. But equally, it's still an option. We do have to have that additional program in place for those individuals who don't want to do the extra hours, who can't do those extra hours. But the program's exactly the same.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Mark. And a couple of other questions. Okay, so how have you found having two different training routes for on-call, apprenticeships and non-apprenticeship? Has that created any gaps?
No, so that's a process we're evaluating now. Our on-call and whole time do exactly the same training, but in a different format. The modules over a longer period of time. They complete exactly the same development tasks over the period of the apprenticeship, and they go through the same gateway assessment for competence, and then obviously the endpoint assessment for the apprentices.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Mark. And these all seem to be coming your way, but I think they'll come. Some will come Amanda's way as well.
If I could just add to that, Kit,
Yeah.
as we said earlier, it is about mapping that existing journey into the apprenticeship. So it shouldn't be that the apprenticeship has to do far more work or a different part of work to any non-apprentice on-call firefighters. They are both following the same journey.
Okay, that's great. And is completing the on-call apprenticeship written into their employment contract?
Not at the moment with ourselves. That they do have an apprenticeship contract when they sign up to the apprenticeship, but that is something that obviously it will develop in the future.
Okay, great. Let's have some other questions. We've got some other questions as well. So this is a question for both of you, really. So nationally, it's not uncommon for the training of on-call firefighters to differ from that of whole-time colleagues. What were your top 3 challenges, and how did you overcome these? Don't know who wants to go first.
I'll let Amanda go first.
I think, as I said earlier, probably the biggest challenge is actually looking at the development journey and actually doing that mapping against the standard, making sure that that is rigorous, it's fit for purpose, it isn't creating a huge workload that's over onerous on the individuals taking part in that apprenticeship programme. And I think it's worth putting the work into that, and it will take time. So if anyone approached me and said, we need to get started next week, that's just not going to happen. It's really important that we take the time to do that properly, because once you've got started, to actually go back and then try and change things results in not a very good quality product and actually not a good experience for the learners. So I think that's the first challenge. I'll come up with a second one, Mark, while you're thinking of the for me, the second one as well is actually getting the whole organisation on board. I know that Mark and his team, and now Laura as well, actually have been doing a lot of work with the line managers and the mentors at station to make sure that there is a greater awareness of the apprenticeship and how it works, and more important, how they can get involved in supporting their apprentice.
Yeah, and for us initially, the initial challenge was to work out the hours that was available and what hours they needed to do per station, because we needed to map it out and plan it out. And like Amanda just said, we did learn it's a development period. Is the important part of the apprenticeship where they're practicing their skills, and that's a bit that we had to engage with line managers now and demonstrate the importance that it's their responsibility to develop these firefighters. So yeah, that was one of the challenges. Yeah.
I mean, that kind of leads into another question, which is probably for you, Mark, in terms of what advice would you give to anyone on the call today from a fire and rescue services who needs to get buy-in, if you like, from the service?
Yeah, it's don't make it too complicated. You're already doing a training for on-call firefighters. You're already giving them a development period. It's about demonstrating that you can use that same training development period for the apprenticeship, and then looking at the funding and how you can use the funding to improve your developing your firefighters. And I've hopefully demonstrated today with the funding available that that it's a win-win for the apprentice, for the organisations, and for the firefighter in general.
Yeah, and I think anyone who's on the call today, who's, because I know the funding is quite complicated, and the hours and how the hours work, particularly at quieter stations and all of those sorts of things. But if we will make sure that you can contact us, and we'll make sure that we put you in contact with Mark and Amanda so they can go through things in more detail, because that is a complication. But I suppose with the funding's there, and so yeah, you might as well use it, really. It makes sense, doesn't it? It's definitely a cost benefit there. What about with on-call firefighters? Did their other employment impact on progress at all?
Not with the trial we've done. In actual fact, there's benefits to the employers as well. It improves their abilities, their behaviours. So yeah, for the employers, there is an improvement there for them as well that they can achieve.
I think as well, our experience of working with Devon and Somerset is that the recruitment is very rigorous, and those questions are asked to ensure that individuals being offered the apprenticeship programme are actually able to commit to doing things like their learning journals. There is a small amount of work there that has to be done. I'm not going to say it's completely seamless and it's that there isn't any impact, but there's Devon and Somerset work really hard during that recruitment process, and then as a college, obviously we follow that up with a college interview and actually just explore that this is the right path for that individual. Okay,
oh, here's an interesting one. So what is the average age of apprentices, as this term sometimes viewed apprenticeships, and there has been that, hasn't there? Everyone thinks an apprenticeship is for someone who's 16 to 18. So and it is getting over that kind of branding, isn't it? So what's oh, Laura's put in here that she's 38. She's quite happy to share her age then. Thank you, Laura, for that. That's brilliant. What would you say, Mark and Amanda, for your on-call or for any of your apprentices? What's your average age, roughly?
I think looking at that first cohort of 6 that went through on the on-call, they aged between 18 and somewhere near Laura's age. And everywhere in between. Certainly when we've looked at the recruitment we've done recently, Mark, I'd say probably late 20s to early 30s is about the average age.
Yeah.
What I do know, with a foot in the kind of full-time college camp and also the apprenticeship camp, is that there are lots of young people out there at 18, 19 leaving college who are absolutely desperate to join the fire service, and there's always that fine line between them having enough kind of real world experience to be able to get through recruitment tests and so on. But what we have proven with the on-call is that they can do it and they can make it and they're successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura's just popped something in which says we have some apprentices in their 50s for the new fire engineer degree apprenticeship. So there you go. Apprenticeships are for everybody, as we know. Another question that's here. Okay, so how long is the on-call development period for non-apprenticeship firefighters? And I think you did cover this sort of, Mark. If it's less than 4 years, is there an incentive not to go on the apprenticeship to gain competent pay earlier?
No, so the program for non-apprentices is a 4-year program. They've got to cover all the tasks, and complete the gateway assessment or competency assessment in exactly the same way. So we won't be rushing non-apprentices through a program just to get them competent. It's got to be, if they're on a busy station, they demonstrate the ability and do those tasks sooner, we can bring them forward in the same way as we can do that on an apprenticeship, as long as they cover those hours. But the same process all the way through.
Okay, that's great. And a couple more for you, Mark. So do your on-call watch managers hold the assessor qualification? Quite a specific one there.
No, we actually do like an in-house assessors qualification as such, as part of their development program. But we have qualified assessors that do the reviews and the first level, the quality assurance of the training, basically.
Okay, great. Do on-call firefighters in Devon and Somerset do safe and wells?
So they can have the opportunity to do that, and that was one of the gaps that we did have on the trial. And what we're saying is that, if you're bringing in an on-call apprentice to an old-time shift, for instance, then we have to ensure that they get that quality input for the community engagement side of the apprenticeship. However, a lot of our on-call stations do a lot of community engagement, and we do have a dedicated team that go out and do the home fire safety checks, and our apprentices could buddy up with a couple of those visits to get the experience as well. So there's opportunities there to do them within the service.
It's about creating those opportunities, isn't it? Absolutely.
That's
to
it.
give them that broad range of experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to say then, Kit, as well, it was clear listening to Laura and James just now that actually being given the opportunity to do those things as part of their apprenticeship was something that they really welcomed and enjoyed. So I don't think people see it as, oh, do I have to? It's actually something that people really want to get out there and get involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, if on-call are unable to do the apprenticeship, do they follow another qualification, i.e. the MVQ, or is there not a specific qualification for those individuals?
No, we don't in Devon and Somerset. We've never had a qualification for operational firefighters in Devon and Somerset, other than we did look at the NVQ. That didn't work for us. We found it was too onerous and too heavy on providing evidence that really didn't mean a lot for the practical firefighter. So no, we don't run another qualification.
Okay, that's great. Okay, we're getting through them. Okay, let's have a look here. And I think you've sort of answered this a bit, Mark, as well, and we can definitely put you in contact with people who want more information about this. Is it more difficult to achieve the programme on quiet stations where firefighters do not get the higher number of shouts?
So this is where the additional crewing element comes in, where you've got to pay on-call firefighters come in and do support whole-time stations or ride supernumerary to get that development time. So a station that has one call a week, you do have to do, an on-call apprentice will have to do 9 hours, so an operational shift or equivalent work in the community, paid work, but it has to be developing those skills for the apprenticeship.
Yeah, absolutely, that's great. Here's an interesting one. Have you asked the existing on-call what they think? well, we've heard from 2 who have just recently gone through, haven't we? And what do the watch commanders think of this, or what do the WC think of this process?
So that is with regards to the watch commanders on stations. Obviously, it was new a couple of years ago. We was developing it. One thing we've done now with recruiting the new apprentices whole time at the moment, we've done briefing sessions to the watch commanders and the stations, the firefighters, and explaining the process, because it's important they're part of the journey for the apprentice, and they're the ones who's developing those firefighters out there on stations at incidents. So that is one thing that we did learn early on. We do need to engage with the stations, and that's what we're doing now.
And it's, I would say, and Amanda, you'd probably agree with this, that's very common in apprenticeship. So the training and assessing team are really on board with everything. The apprentice is on board, but sometimes management supervisors, wherever they sit, they vary in terms of engagement. And can sometimes put some barriers up. So that kind of tripartite relationship's absolutely key. And it's common, I think, across certainly all the apprenticeships that I've worked on in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we encounter quite a lot, Kit. There's a lot of kind of head in the sand burying sometimes. And it's not because people don't want to get involved, but they're not quite sure where to start. Certainly, Mark and his team have been doing masses of work to engage all the stations and the line managers in the apprenticeship programme. And we've also done a piece of work, again, with Mark's support as well, in getting them to understand the electronic portfolio and giving them read access, so they read only access, so they can actually go in and look at the progress their apprentice is making. We insist that the line manager is there at the 6 weekly review, and that they actually make a contribution to outlining the journey that apprentice is currently making. Are there things that we need to give more support with? How well are they actually doing on station? How well are they actually doing in their job? And if you actually give people the tools and the opportunities to be engaged, then they will. Once you actually give people the information that they need, it's a bit like a light bulb moment. It's, oh yeah, that's fine. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? And I think as I said before, the development coach, learning coaches, trainer assessors, whatever you call them within your organisation, they're absolutely crucial to actually oil all those wheels to make sure that those communications between the learner, the progress, and their line manager and what's happening at station all work together in the same direction smoothly. And it's not an easy job of work, but that's the challenge of working with apprenticeships, and that's what gets us all out of bed in the morning. That's what gives us the motivation to actually keep improving that.
And it is also, it's that fear of change, isn't it? But like Mark said, and like you said, Amanda, the program's already there. It's just how you can arrange it so that it fits. It's already there. The training's already there, so it isn't a huge change. Okay.
It's the language sometimes, Kit.
It's the language,
the language around education and apprenticeships can actually appear completely
and Ofsted.
Yeah, all those things.
It's all very scary for people sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay. Mark, how did you select the cohort of on-call apprentices? Did you advertise or ask for volunteers, or a combo?
So for the pilot, we looked at our busiest stations, because obviously the hours was the issue. What we wanted to do is prove that they could achieve the apprenticeship without giving them too many additional hours. So we looked at I think the top 12 stations we had in Devon and Somerset, and we picked at that time who was being recruited. We offered them the opportunity. So like I say, we had 6 originally to start off with, 2 from Newton Abbot, which is one of our busiest stations, and then a couple different types of setup on the stations. We had a salary station, we had a one pump station and stuff like that, just to see how it worked. So it was at the time when we started the apprenticeship, we offered it to those recruits, and they took us up on that. Going forward, again, it will be offered to all on-call firefighters going forward once we get the program up and running.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so we are drawing to the end now. Thank you everybody for all the questions. We haven't managed to answer all of them. We're almost there, but we haven't managed to answer them all. But we will make sure that we collate everything and send it round to you. And I want to thank you all for taking the time to join this webinar today, and for your questions and comments over the past hour. I hope that we've given you a good insight into how this apprenticeship standard can work effectively for on-call firefighters, and given you something to take away and think about. Keep in contact with us, and get in touch if you'd like to have a more detailed conversation with Mark, with Amanda, or with us. Look out for the email that will have the slides and the recording from today, and probably some additional links and resources. And that will also be hosted on our website at sfjawards.com. And again, I'd like to thank Mark, Amanda, and Laura and James for joining us today. Finally, your feedback on each event we run is really important to us. So please, can I ask you to fill in the quick survey that's going to pop up as you leave the webinar. That helps us to improve on what we do all the time. And thank you very much, everyone. Time to get a cup of coffee now. So goodbye and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.